Hey, it's Mythic Mike. I'm here to alert you to the most broken mechanic in Tarkir. People are not valuing it correctly. Wizards messed up. It's Busto. Good news is it also looks fun, but my God, something is wrong here. We're going to do a longer set review shortly, but I had to just highlight this because what on earth, guys? What I'm talking about are the new graveyard mechanics Renew and Harmonize that are going to be in the Tarkir standard set coming out shortly. The issue is usually when you can exile a card from your graveyard to get an ability, it's overpriced and not that great, right? You pay 3 mana to exile the card from your graveyard and you get like a land, or you draw a card, or you put a counter on something. These cards have Renew, where you pay mana and you exile the card from your graveyard for an ability, but this ability is as good as a full card, guys. So by just milling it, it's as if you drew it. What on earth? Like, look at this. This is probably the most busted one, but look at this one. If we ever have to play it, which we never will, it's 4 mana to have it be a shapeshifter and copy of any creature on the battlefield, including opponents. So, like, not the end of the world, but we're milling this bad boy into our graveyard, and it's as if we drew a card because it's literally the win con of the deck. It is 3 mana. Exile the card from your graveyard. Put a +1/+1 counter on target non-legendary creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn. Now, the good news is they can use removal to try to disrupt this, right? So we'll say that first. But if they're tapped out or if they don't have removal on that specific turn, you just win. Because think of all the things you can do here. There's obviously going to be so many combos, right? You can turn everything into like a drain creature that makes them lose life when you sacrifice a creature, and then all your creatures are the drain are making them lose life, and you sacrifice one creature and you ping them to death, or you play it as a preacher of the schism and everyone, or preacher, the black 3 mana preacher with attack triggers, and then all your creatures get attack trigger. That's fine, but you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. Picture this deck. Bunch of small mill creatures that, like the rat that mills you 2, and the other guy that mills you, the green 1-drop that surveils 2, and you just mill things. And then you've got 4 Souls of the Lost, and maybe 4 Souls of the Lost get really big for creatures in your graveyard, which, by the way, this is a creature. Or 4 of like the 4/2 flyer that gets cheaper for creatures in your graveyard. You've got all these like little 1/1s that were milling you, and you just have 1 10/10 Souls of the Lost out. And then you play this from your graveyard. You didn't need what we didn't do anything. We just milling. We have a couple big mill creatures, and we play this from our graveyard for 3 mana, and we turn all our little mill creatures into 4/2 flyers or 10/10 Souls of the Lost, and you just win. It's that easy. And that's not even getting creative. Why is it only 3 mana, and why is it so good from the graveyard on a thing that's also potentially fine just to play? Like, that's a full cards with a value. If we start getting full cards if this ability for 3 mana existed on a card, I would play it in certain decks. Why is it from the graveyard? Like, what is happening, right? Like, something's just wrong there. And I'll give you another example. Not all of them are completely full, but like this one. 3 mana Vampire Flying Death Touch Lifelink. We already have like the 2/3 version of this. This is better, right? Reasonable card in a vampire deck, or even mono black, to be honest. But then it has Renew for 3. Exile it and put a Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink counter on a creature. Is this a full card's value? Probably not. Probably I'd pay 2 mana for that on a card. If there was a card that said put a flying, it was like an aura, and it said the creature gets fly. I mean, it's even better than an aura because they can't necessarily take it away in some situations. But there was an aura that said this creature gets Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink. I'd pay 2 mana for that. And it's from the graveyard. Like, again, why is this so close to a full card's value from the graveyard on also something that's pretty good? Like, what? Why is it like am I the only one? Like, what is happening? This one's a little less, but it's still like it's 4 mana 5/5 when this creature enters, mill cards equal number of lands, mill 4, which then goes with the strategy. Not amazing, but reasonable in some decks. And then the Renew is 2 mana, exile this card from your graveyard. So again, we'll usually just want this in our graveyard, and we're not going to play it as a creature. And you put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of lands in your graveyard. So if you're self-mill or something that gets lands in your graveyard, and you can also play Fable, and you have like 6 lands in your graveyard, which isn't that hard to do, you never even had to play this. And then for 2 mana, something gets +6/+6. Again, usually, and this also will trigger things because there's things when there's so many new cards, Insidious and other cards now that benefit from things leaving your graveyard, especially creatures. But why is it 2 mana to give something like +6/+6? Usually it's 2 mana to give something like +1/+1 from your graveyard. Like, why is this? You get my point. Something's wrong. This one's a little not as good, but it's also broke because of both sides, right? And I say sides, it's not really sides, but I'm just calling it that. But this is a 2 mana Rot Curse Rakasha, 2 mana 5/5 trample, decayed, so it can't block, and whenever it attacks, it dies. But you can just have it sit around and it will gain you life from the demon case because it's a 2 mana demon. So on turn 2 and turn 3, you play the case that benefits from you having a demon. Also, getting 5 damage from a trample thing they're not going to want to block is fine. And then once this is dead, whether you mill it or you just play it that way, then you can like kind of one-sided board wipe them to some extent, right? It's not necessarily a full card, but it's close enough, especially on this body that auto sacrifices itself and is like this is statted to auto sacrifice, which then makes it even easier to play the renew. So it's like, wow, something's wrong here. I think something's wrong. You don't understand all these graveyard things when we already have good graveyard strategies. Yeah, it's not omniscience, right, or something like that. But I mean, maybe there'll be graveyard hate to deal with it, but if not, some of this stuff will take over, especially in best of one. It's a little interesting because usually people don't want to play a ton of graveyard hate. I mean, you're probably going to have to because this stuff is wild because the renew X/2/2, exile this card from your graveyard, put a decayed counter on each of X target creatures. So for 4 mana, you can make 2 other creatures never be able to block, and if they ever attack with it, they die. That's game winning, right? And that's after this already did 5 damage and maybe gained you life by being a demon. It's like, what? I mean, I'm looking forward to this card. I'm not gonna lie to you. Now, the other thing, we just have 2 more. Some of these are not as broken because they're costed right, but I still think they're not really taking this into account, that we're going to be milling and we're going to have all these options from our graveyard of things we can just play back. As like milling should not be the equivalent of drawing a card, and it's getting closer and closer to that. Nature's Rhythm, pretty cool, right? X and 2, search your library for a creature card, mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So if you pay 4 mana, you can only get a 2 mana creature, but still you can like pay 3 mana and get that the poison guy, right? Or the toxic guy, and like combo decks will use this. But realistically, again, I don't want to play it on that side. I want to play it on the other side because this has even a crazier mechanic. Harmonize, X and 4 green. Harmonize means you can cast it from your graveyard for its harmonize cost, but you can tap a creature you control and reduce the cost by an amount of generic mana equal to its power. So what this means, if you're playing mono green and you have a 4/4 out for 4 mana, and you mill this in your graveyard for 4 mana, you can do the harmonize and tap the 4/4. It'll pay 4 mana for that. And then, so then X will be 4 just off 4 mana. And then you can find any 4 mana card for 4 mana, which is busted. And if you tap like a 6/6 or a 7/7, like a big mill creature, even if it came out small or a creature with a bunch of counters, if you tap a 7/7, you can for 4 mana from your graveyard. Again, why is this playable and so good from your graveyard? You never even had to draw this. You can just find any 7-drop in your deck and put it on the battlefield. Like, what's happening? What is happening? The last one, this one, some people might see it a little not as good, but in certain decks, this will be like, why is everything so good from the graveyard? This is a pretty cool card, by the way, and it's a budget banger. 2 mana sorcery, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters amongst 1 or 2 target creatures. So you put a counter on 2 creatures. Creatures you control with counters on them. So hopefully you have other creatures with counters. It doesn't have to be +1/+1. It can be like oil or whatever else, or the lifelink that we showed before. Any counters. Creatures with counters on them gain vigilance and trample until end of turn. So it like just smashes through and wins the game in many situations, right? especially in mono green if you have some counters on things and you have some big boys that don't have trample. And then vigilance is pretty crazy. So this is like a good card. Now, why the heck did they put harmonize on it? I guess green needed a boost, so maybe they're trying to do that. But this one, again, you're going to pay 1 because you're going to tap. You can pay 5, or you can tap a 4/4 and only pay 1 mana to play it back from your graveyard. So you can play it on 1 turn, and then next turn attack him. And if they're not dead for whatever reason, the very next turn tap a 4/4, pay 1, attack him with all your creatures again. They'll have +1/+1 and trample and vigilance again. What? And I'm going to end just looking at this again. A win con from your graveyard. A win con creature from your graveyard. Ooh. Now, again, the positive is that they do look fun. We're going to break them. Like and subscribe. I had to let you know about this. I know other people probably talked about it, but I need to highlight this because my God, guys. What? What? All right, let's go, baby. Mashing. Let's go.